Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. I'm Marwan Makanmaka, President of the FCCT and correspondent for the Interpress Service News Agency. It's always a pleasure to have a packed house. Some of you are familiar faces, some of you are not. This club is open to journalists and non-journalists. Do feel free to join us. There are lots of benefits. This evening's event is the result of a relationship the FCCT has established with International Peace Foundation. And the Peace Foundation does bring a regular series of high-profile speakers. One of them is Mr. Oliver Stone, who we are going to hear this evening. Uwe Morawetz, the head of the International Peace Foundation, will say a few words and then introduce Mr. Stone, and then he would speak. We would follow the usual format. After the speaker finishes, there's a mic at the back, and we will open the session for Q&A. Please restrict yourself to one question. Don't deliver speeches. If you do, I'll just cut you in mid-sentence, because the whole purpose is to have a friendly and enlightening dialogue with such a well-established and famous filmmaker. So may I first ask Uwe to say a few words. Uwe.
Yeah, good evening and welcome to the third ASEAN event series, Bridges, Dialogues Towards a Culture of Peace. Bridges is facilitated by the International Peace Foundation, a non-political, non-religious foundation under the patronage of 21 Nobel Peace Prize laureates based in Vienna. Its current series of Bridges is being continuously held in Thailand, Cambodia, and the Philippines from November 2009 until April this year as an independent contribution to the Decade for Culture of Peace and Nonviolence, which was initiated and promoted by the United Nations General Assembly. It follows a series of 350 events, which the International Peace Foundation has already hosted in Thailand, the Philippines, and Malaysia since 2003. 35 Nobel laureates, as well as 13 other keynote speakers and artists, including Dr. Hans Blix, Chucky Chan, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, Vanessa May, Jesse Norman, Demanito Roddick, and Dr. James Wolfenson, participated in these events, which until now reached an audience of 150,000 participants. The aim of Bridges is to facilitate and strengthen dialogue and communication between societies in Southeast Asia with their multiple cultures and faiths, as well as with peoples in other parts of the world, to promote understanding and trust. The events build bridges with the local universities and other institutions in Southeast Asia to establish long-term relationships with Nobel laureates in all fields and with other keynote speakers and artists, which result in common research programs and other forms of collaboration. By enhancing science, technology, and education as a basis for peace and development, the events aim at a better cooperation for the advancement of peace, freedom, and security in the region with the active involvement of the young generation, ASEAN's key to the future. I'm grateful to our long-term partner, the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand, as well as to our sponsors who have enabled us to make the idea of Bridges a reality. So let us welcome today Hollywood legend Oliver Stone, whose work has earned him 3 Academy Awards. We are honored that he has agreed to come to Thailand to support the events, and we all look forward to his keynote speech and to his important contribution to build bridges. I would also like to announce the presence today of Lily Hayslip, the woman whose life has been portrayed in Oliver Stone's movie Heaven and Earth, which he filmed here in Thailand. Welcome, Lily Hayslip. And a warm welcome, Oliver Stone.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Uwe, for your generous introduction. I think I'm above camera here. There you go. I actually struggled today to prepare remarks for tonight because I spoke this morning to a group of high school students and I adjusted my remarks accordingly to talk to people who were starting out in the world. I knew I would be facing people tonight who had lived their lives, a lot of them, and were fairly well along. So the remarks that I hope you understand, the remarks I made this morning would not be appropriate for tonight, and I was struggling, as I say, to come up with a theme for you hardened people, hardened especially foreign correspondents, as you know, are famous for drinking, and I see quite a few of you at the bar, so I hope some of what I say will make some sense to you, but not seem too pedantic or pretentious. But, you know, it's a hard thing to walk these lines and sort of say something that means something to you and at the same time not look silly. And talking about peace to foreign correspondents is not that easy because most of them don't believe it's possible. I know that having traveled a lot of the world, I'm pretty cynical at times and skeptical about the processes of the noble aspirations of politicians and diplomats to bring peace to the world. But we try, you know, we go on and we try. So forgive me if I sound perhaps too Harvard-like or Yale-like, but I'm going to try to make a point, and I'll leave it at that, and then I'll open it up I'd love to have questions and see what you guys are thinking, if at all. I saw a couple of friends that were fairly well along tonight in their intake of wine and beer, but I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, look, what can I say to you guys? Because most of you have been there and know what I'm saying. In my lifetime, you're journalists, most of you, and you'd like to hear stories, and we all have a narrative. We follow a narrative line. The problem, as you know, with a lot of first draft history being journalism, is that the narrative is very quick. You guys have to decide, or guys and women have to decide on the day often what the angle is, and the angle is quick. You don't have much time to think about it. It's over. People like myself and historians, dramatists and historians, do have the luxury of more time, and we can look at the patterns of history and in our lifetimes and see things that you were not able to see in the newspaper. The newspaper can be very difficult to read in the morning for people such as ordinary laymen, because it's such a bauble of events and mostly bad news, pessimism, horrible things happening every day. And we emphasize the bad news. We never really emphasize the good news, the development of society, the teachers who go to work every day, the doctors, the scientists, the people who the mailman and the ordinary people who do their job and who don't get press coverage. And so much good gets transferred every day. Our societies generally are working, but we would not know that from reading the newspapers or watching television, especially not in the United States. Whereas television, as you know, in the 1980s was turned into a for-profit institution. Originally, when I grew up, the television airwaves were owned by the public. They were supposed to be owned by the public. That was what the Federal Communications Commission was about. In about 1982, Larry Tisch, who bought CBS, said, well, look, the news division will now be for profit. And he declared it peremptorily, and it was quite a shock at the time, and people were objecting to it and so forth, but it did go private. And as a result, the news in America became very, even worse than it was. It became short-sighted, it became a soundbite, and it became for entertainment purposes. And before you knew it, the news was competing for the attention of the public and using every cheap device possible including the O.J. Simpson trial and all the murders that occurred and so forth and so on. And that's frankly why I did Natural Born Killers in 1994 in protest against what I saw as a media landscape that was exploiting violence. It's gotten worse, and the television stations are now making the only divisions that seem to be making any money at NBC in America, which is under threat now, is the news division. It makes so much money that it's become a jewel of NBC. Is that good? No, it's terrible. Because the news should not be making money. If it were making money like that, it's because it's entertaining and they're selling sound bites and superficiality and all the things that we see in People magazine and we hate. And that's what it is. It's just unwatchable because it doesn't even bother to do what at least the print newspapers are doing, which is to at least probe a little further and get some real, perhaps, dissent and reassessments. In that vein, in my lifetime, I look back in my 60s and I see a series of call them mass illusions, and no one made me aware of them when I was young, but I would like to point out that on a huge social scale, I've lost count, but whether it was, really the first great illusion of my life, or call it even a conspiracy, was one that my father and and the silent generation from World War II sold us, the so-called greatest generation, sold us that communism was a world conspiracy that was threatening my country, the United States, in a death grip, and that China and Russia were united, as well as Yugoslavia and all the countries in South America that were looking for change. Any aspect of social reform was viewed as communism for the most part, and in Asia too. And this was why I ended up in Vietnam, because it was the hysteria about communism. And now, of course, with time, with insight, we and with historians writing deftly about it, we now see that we were prey to so many illusions in our lifetime, and that hurt us and killed millions of people in Vietnam, where Lê Ly is from, as well as in Cambodia, where I'm going tomorrow. Thailand managed to stay out of this thing for the most part. But anyway, look, the world has suffered greatly from this illusion, this delusion. And more recently, of course, we have the Bush and Blair march to war, false war in Iraq. And I saw my media in America, the liberal media, the center media, support that war, as they are now supporting Afghanistan war. They also supported Iraq 1, which many people have now, with historical hindsight, re-examined and are beginning to re-examine. At the time, I remember being a proponent also, said, let's go for it. Iraq 1 made sense. The more I read, the more I know, I have to re-examine my own prejudices. Certainly the second war in Iraq was a shock to me as a Vietnam veteran, and it was probably the worst 10 years of my life have just expired, I hope, but I'm not sure anymore after the news this week. But I thought this last decade was perhaps worst decade of my life under Mr. George Bush Jr. I've made 3 films about Vietnam, and many of them had great impact, except for Heaven and Earth, which was not appreciated in America because it was about Vietnamese people. But I saw Vietnam become Iraq by another name. Beyond that, I saw the lies of the Reagan administration, deep lies in the 1980s, in Central America, where I did the film Salvador, which some of you may have seen. It was about foreign correspondents, about a scoundrel I knew called Richard Boyle, wonderful truth-telling scoundrel from Ireland, Irish-American. I saw it most blatantly in Nicaragua, but it was no less evil than our policy under different presidents with different words in their mouths in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. In my lifetime, in Guatemala, which was a bloodbath, which we destabilized that government in 1954. In Brazil, a police state at that time. Chile.